Alright, so in this chapter, I'll be adding a few more parts. I'll be adding a window right here, a graded window. I'll be adding that archway, that kind of arched window from before that I'd shown in the plans. Let's go ahead and open this right there. And then I will add blast damage right in here. So let's get to it. The easiest thing to do would just be to create this window. I went through earlier and selected a photo that I think would make an excellent graded texture, a fence, and I will Control C this and paste this. I'm going to paste this on top of the other layers because I don't want anything to render onto it. Control V to place it. And we're done. Just kidding. A little bit of humor. Alright, let me scale this down. Now, at this point, if I wanted to set my window this way, if you want to rotate to specific degrees, you've got this little widget thing right up here where you can rotate -45. Or if you want to do it by hand, right out here, you can hold down Shift and watch the degree rotations up here. If I hold down Shift when I rotate, it snaps to every 15 degrees, which is very useful. I, however, am not going to do that. I kind of dig just having the diagonal lines there. But what I will do is hold down Alt and Shift to maintain the Shift maintains the aspect ratio, and Alt will shrink it from the center. Okay, I'll head into there. We'll make this a little bit smaller. One more time. Okay, excellent. Excuse me. Now, it's well sized. I enjoy it, but obviously what we're missing now is a kind of shadow underneath and a highlight right here. So I've shown you a few layer effects earlier. I've shown you drop shadow, inner shadow, outer glow. I don't think I've shown you inner glow yet, but what I'll use now is bevel and emboss. So bevel and emboss has, like all the others, quite a few settings. There are different styles to this bevel and emboss. I'll go ahead and turn up the size so you can see these a little bit more clearly. There's inner bevel, outer bevel, emboss, pillow emboss, and stroke emboss. Okay, for this one I'll be using an outer bevel. That obviously I'll be making a few more changes to it, because if this is supposed to be hard stone, we've got too much of a nice soft curved gradient there, completely destroying the look and feel of stone. Which is what I'll be taking care of that with this technique drop down right here, and I'll be going with chisel hard. So better, but still not what we're going for. The direction now, I'll actually set this to down. So I'll reverse the direction. So now the window's sunk into the wall, and it's not popping out. Alright. So a few more things to change. I'll turn off using global light. Set this to like 90 and 11. Well, maybe I'll pull that back down just a little bit so I can get maybe a little bit more of a highlight right down there. And let's see, my depth, turning this up considerably. That way things will really pop out. The size, I'll turn the size down quite a bit. Now that looks far more integrated. So just to get the before and after, turn off layer visibility, turn it back on. So the last thing to do for this window right here is the little squares, or the negative space in this grid. It's a little bit blacker than I would really like. The overall feel of this texture is, while there is black, there's not a whole lot of it, and this is just a real dark, dense spot. And it really kind of distracts my eye when I'm looking at it. So go ahead and create, again, I'll use the levels adjustment layer. We get the histogram for the entire image. And I'll hit OK. And make this a clipping layer, holding down the Alt button. Double click this to open it up. There we go. Now we see the histogram is drastically different. So if this is too much of a dark spot for me, obviously the first thing I'm going to do is pull up the actual black point. Now I see, as I'm pulling up the black point, it's actually lightening up everything in there, including the actual diagonal grid itself. So if I want to turn that back down, I'll just move my gray spot over. I'm at too gray right now. Alright, so this is after, before. Again, it's subtle, but I think this works much better in here. Alright, so now there's to create the arch, the kind of arched window. And what I'm going to do for this, let me rename this real quick to graded window. What I'm going to do to create this arch, I could go back into Maya, create a whole new arch, or I can take an arch that's already existing, take this, drop it down here, duplicate the layer set, Control E to merge the layer set. It still maintains luminosity as the blending mode, and move the arch right up here. It's a little bit larger. So go ahead and move this down. Shrink it and scale it. We want a little bit of a taller window. Alright. Take that. And going to duplicate the arch once more. And I'll merge that layer set once again. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm only going to take this top area from the arch. Let me expand that selection a little bit more. So a quick word about selecting in Photoshop. With the Marquee tool right over here, which is a hotkey M, if you hold down your left mouse button, you see that there's actually 4 different selection tools. There's a rectangle, elliptical, which makes circles or ellipses, single row or single column. So working with the rectangular, got my cursor right here, and I've got, alright, So I've got about that much. Now if this is too much, I can hold down the Alt key. Let me turn off the stones real quick so you can see what this looks like, or the wood. So when I hold down the Alt key, I get that little minus sign underneath. So with that minus sign, now once I drag over this area, it subtracts from the current selection. Now I've gone too far. If I want to add back a little bit more, I can hold down Shift, and instead of the minus with Alt, I get plus. I get the plus right here. So now I can add all that back to my selection. Maybe take away from the sides a little bit. Alright, and this selection will now become the layer mask. Alright, it's a little bit too large, no worries. We'll take this, scale this in. So now we've got a stone, like a keystone or coin stone right there at the top of that arch. So I'll take these two layers right here, make them a layer set, arched window, hit OK, and remove all the stones right down here. I might pull this arch right to about here, right to there. So the last thing to do is obviously not going to have an arched window with no window in it. So I'll come right down here to the stone facade, add a layer mask, and in here just paint out the interior. So that exposes a little kink, a little bit of a problem, nothing to worry about. Come over here to the wood layer set. Now one thing I did in between chapters very early when I created this wood layer set is you can see that my wood layer set is heavily populated. I'll go ahead and explain this now. I have two different wood textures going on. I've got this underneath for color, and I have these layers of wood on top for texture. And again, what I'm look at that. I'm not even using those for color, so we can actually just take all of these, can delete all of these. Control E to merge those. Throw that away. Done. No worries. So actually all I need to do now is just take the two on the right, this one and this one. When I link them together, I get this, I scale them together. So move those up. Presto changeo. So one final thing that I want to add here is I just want a little bit of separation between this kind of arch and the stones beneath it. Something very minor. So open up arched window. I'll take arch copy here, and this time I will use a stroke layer effect. Now the default color is always red. Don't know why. It doesn't remember the last color used. It's always red. So hit OK. Obviously I won't be sticking with this, but this I'm using red right now so I can find out what I need to pull out, what's present, what's not. The last thing I'll do is I'll go back and change the color. But so I've got a lot of red right here, and I'm figuring that this is something that is showing up in, or that's being allowed to show up in the actual layer mask of my layer set. Because the layer mask for the layer set will turn off anything inside. So I'll go ahead and select arch copy. I will invert my selection, and I will flood with black. So now that line has become a lot softer. The reason it's become a lot softer is because of the arch. I merged the arch layer set, and one of the effects that got merged in that was the drop shadow and all the other kind of soft shadow areas around that. So that's why we have that nice soft edge in there. It really works to our advantage. But I'll clean up the red in here. I'll brush all this out. And my effect, I'll change this to black or dark gray. Hit OK. Alright, so now if I try that same, if I try that same stroke effect on the key, and that keystone right there, it's not going to work very well. In fact, I'll do a copy layer style and I'll paste it. We get those really hard black lines. If I didn't want those really hard black lines, I could just change the opacity, turn that down, and that works much better. Again, another way to do it would be to use outer glow, and instead of use screen, go with the multiply and choose a darker color. Now one thing you may be noticing right now is that the keystone is actually not showing up because the layer mask for the layer set I created from the arch copy layer right there. What I need to do is I need to take just this little section of the arch copy 2 and add that to the mask, the layer mask of the layer set. So to get that selection, I'll do a control select on the layer mask and invert my selection, and then select the arch copy 2 RGB channels, and I will cut out the selection. So now all I've got left in that layer is this little area right here. So I'll take that, and with that selected, flood with the color white into the layer mask for the layer set. and now I've got that keystone showing up, but I don't have the outline just yet. I don't have this stroke effect showing up on the tops and bottom yet. So what I'll do one more time is select, control select the Arch Copy To layer, and what I need is, I need like a pixel around the top and bottom and on the sides to show this stroke effect that we just created. And a real simple way to do that is to expand the selection area. And you do that by going under Select, Modify, Expand Selection. And I'm actually just going to expand this by 1 pixel. Hit OK. And now with that new selection area, again flood with white. And I've got just the faintest little edge right there. Alright. And now, now for my students over at the Dave School, I will create blast damage. I teach video game making over there, so they're very during the texturing time, they always love hearing about blast damage. Add blast damage. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Now I chose this kind of ugly, nasty, gnarly texture for blast damage. Considering what it's going to be used for, I figured an ugly, nasty, kind of gnarly textured image would be most appropriate. So I'll go ahead and place this right here. There's a bunch of ways to set up the blending mode for this, and I'll actually just I'll walk you through this real quick. And as I'm doing this, I will also show, I'll bring up the history palette right here. So this is the current history. If I start experimenting with blending modes in this drop-down box, I can select this right here, and once the word normal is highlighted in blue, I can just push down with the arrow key. And I can see over here how it's, taking all these changes. Some of these are some really cool effects. Not what we're going for right now, but fantastic nonetheless. But as I'm doing this, notice that going from normal down to difference, I've used up almost all of my current undos. Right, so a better way to experiment with this is to double click on the layer and what you get the exact same blend mode option. You get this linear burn, or you get this little drop down right here, and you can do as you did before. Once the word normal is highlighted, you can use the arrow key. But what this is doing, this is not taking up any of your undos, which is fantastic. Well, excuse me, I'll try not to enunciate my T's so loudly. Okay, for this one I will stick with a multiply, and I'll just hit OK. Oh, and this showed up as blending options. So all the changing I did when I double clicked the layer set, that showed up as blending options. Move this off the screen now. All right. So some other things that I will I'll do to this to kind of have it show up. This is where I'm going to start getting into custom brushes. But before I do that, I need to desaturate this layer. There's a few ways to do this. I could come down Actually, instead of using a layer effect, I could use an adjustment layer and do, was it hue saturation. Now if I did it this way, yeah, I turned my saturation down. Um, the problem with this is that I know that I need this layer to be desaturated. Like I just know that. So it doesn't make sense to have a whole new layer doing desaturation. Um, Up here under image, adjustments, there's desaturate, which is Control-Shift-U as well. Now it does affect the layer, like it's permanent on the layer, and I can't get that color information back unless I undo, and if I run out of undos, then, you know, I have to re-import. But I'm not going to worry about that. So I've got that set, and I'm going to go ahead and play around with these settings. I'll probably turn my opacity down. See how that kind of brightens things up and you can see through it. Just like everything else, I will control select the layer, and then with that selection turn that into its own layer mask. Basically what that does is, in the layer mask, it turns everything that's not the original texture, it makes all that black. Okay, and so I'll start brushing. I'll use the, switch my color real quick. I'll use a standard brush to just kind of pull some areas out that I don't need. I don't want to get too close to this line. Alright. Not everything else we'll do with a custom brush. Let me open up that tab here for you. So this is the custom brush palette. The first window right here is brush presets. And these are all the different presets that are saved with your Photoshop brush. Got these right here. These are some great textures going on in here. Different variations. And that was nice. Now if you haven't been using Photoshop long and you see something like this where it tapers at the end and the size, what they have set right there is this is called shape dynamics. And something specifically that they have set is they have the size of the brush set to the pen pressure of the stylus. So if you have a Wacom tablet, which I highly recommend when using Photoshop, is they've got this pen pressure setting right there. A few chapters ago I mentioned that for my knockout brush when I'm doing black and white inside the layer mask, I prefer not to use that. But we'll go back to brush presets real quick and have a look at some of these others. Alright. If you have Photoshop at home or at work, you're also welcome to do this yourself. So let's take one of these brushes. Probably start with this one right here. One thing that I do want to have set is I'll turn the opacity jitter control to pen pressure. And you can see what that immediately does is it now tapers instead of size, it tapers the opacity. And again, this is based on the pressure of my pen. Alright. This preset, by the way, other things that are included in this preset is dual brush right here. So what it's saying is it's taking two brush shapes, we've got this one right here, and applying this shape to it in a linear burn fashion. So we could mix this up and use other shapes and see how it alters the brush dramatically. but this is what they created, and it's kind of nice. Oh, stars are always cool. So play around with this. It is well worth your time. Alright, and I'll go ahead and just start brushing. Move this down here, we'll probably get back to that. So making sure that I'm in my layer mask. Turn my brush up. And just real lightly I'll start knocking out these edges. Now, what you might be noticing right now is that it's not really getting rid of that edge. And one of the settings that they have turned on is color dynamics. And inside of color dynamics, they have foreground background jitter. What foreground background jitter is how much it paints or how much it mixes the foreground and the background color. Right now, I don't really want to do that. So I'll turn the foreground background jitter to off. Go ahead and move this back down here. There we go. Kind of right about this time where I wish I had some jokes. Or again, you're welcome to fast forward. What I'm going to do right here is brush out the little corner section. So I'll go in and clean that up with a different brush, but what I want to start kind of giving the feel of is that the blast is happening right here, and so this rim kind of protected this area right in here from the blast. Alright, so to finish up this chapter, I'm just going to keep painting and then stop it here. So before I end this chapter completely, I wanted to show one last brush that is really making a difference in this painting that I'm doing. When making brushes, especially to kind of add something like blast damage where you don't just knock out the edges, but it needs to integrate successfully into the underlying texture, you need something that kind of complements the underlying texture itself. And the brush I'm using now looks like, we'll go ahead and, brush I'm using now looks like this. The reason this is really working is because in the brush, I've got all these hard edges, but it's not very repeated. It doesn't tile very well. So each edge is always like a separate or its own kind of unique nook. And the settings for that brush are the dual brush. Well, the brush tip shape itself is just a basic brush. Then I turned on dual brush and I'm using this maple leaf and wet edges right here. Here, I'll show you some other brushes with wet edges. See how it gets that kind of dark line right around there? And that's it. That's what I'm doing to that's the brush I'm using right in here. And I'll show this off real quick. Each time I lay something down, it's always got a jagged edge. So it's pulling away from other areas very well, but not in any noticeable pattern. Alright, that's it for this chapter.